Hey, what's up, guys? This is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our DraftKings MLB Benny's Bats edition for April 15th, 2016. The idea of our Benny's Bats video is to go over each pitcher that's on the mound, try to figure out what their weaknesses are, and then figure out which bats profile to do the best against them. We got a really big slate tonight with 14 games on Friday for MLB DFS, so let's get right into it. Let's start with the easiest game to talk about, San Francisco against the LA Dodgers tonight. We got a matchup between Clayton Kershaw and Madison Bumgarner. I'm going to go real fast through this without even talking about the numbers. You don't really want to be playing guys against either one of them. If you want, go and just check out these two teams play so often that you have a very large sample of BVP for all these batters going up against you. On the Giants side, even though they have been hitting left-handed pitching pretty well this year, the best BVP guy they have is Matt Duffy. Matt Duffy is 5 for 22 lifetime against Clayton Kershaw, which is an average in the low 200s. And he's the best of the guys that I looked at. If you look at some of the other guys, there's guys batting in the 100s. There's guys batting in the single digits like 089, 076. You know, you do not want to be taking any of the bats on the Giants today going up against Clayton Kershaw. Sure, maybe they get a run or two or maybe even three off of them. But if three is your upside, that's not going to help you win the tournament. So stay away from all Giants bats today. Like I said, Duffy's the best one, and even him I don't want to have in there. Actually, Madison Bumgarner is probably the guy who has hit the best against Kershaw. He actually homered off him the last time these guys faced each other. But again, there's nobody that you really want here. On the other side of that game, you look at Bumgarner, and the Dodgers have not been good against him either. There is one exception. Now, actually, maybe two exceptions I guess you can talk about. If Kiki Hernandez is in the game today, I think he's somebody you want to look at. 450 WOBA, 246 ISO score against left-handed pitching, 7 of 13 lifetime against Bumgarner with 3 doubles and a home run. Those are some pretty solid numbers. It's not a huge sample size, but it's significant enough that I think I'm going to give it a little bit of credence. So if you do need a cheap guy today for a tournament only, I'm not going to do it in cash, but again, you know, almost over a 500 batting average, 3 doubles and a home run. So he's not only hit him, but he's hit him hard. I think Kiki Hernandez is about the one guy on the Dodgers team you want to look at. If you're looking for a second guy, Yasiel Puig is probably that guy. Hits left-handed pitching pretty well. 7 of 26 lifetime with 2 home runs against Bumgarner. They're the only two that make any sense for me. Next game we can talk about, we got Arizona going up against San Diego. Now, I know everybody is down on Zach Greinke, who's pitching for Arizona today. But he's going up against a team that the Philadelphia Phillies staff just made look silly in a 3-game set that they just played. Every one of the pitchers that the Phillies threw out there put up good numbers. This San Diego team is striking out almost 10 times per game, 3rd lowest batting average in the league. They're in the lower half of the league for runs scored. And like I said, they just got dominated in the series by the Phillies in a good hitter's park in Philadelphia. They moved back to San Diego, which is not a good hitter's park right now. I definitely think this is going to be a good spot for Greinke. I know a lot of people's push-ups, and he was in a much better hitter's park, which is going to be a problem with him. You know, moving to Arizona from LA, Dodger Stadium is a very good place to pitch. Arizona, not that great of a place to pitch. So I do think Greinke's going to have a little bit of a recession this year, but I think this is one of those spots where you can still roll him out there. He's still a very good pitcher, and he's facing a really bad offense. On the other side of that game, we have James Shields. Now, I like taking lefties against James Shields. 279 average last year, 1.65 whip, gave up 25 home runs and 95 innings pitched. So if you got a guy who's given up basically better than a home run every 4 innings, you know, lefties are definitely the way you want to look here. The guy who stands out the most to me is going to be David Peralta. I really like this guy with a bat in his hand. You know, he's a very professional hitter. They put a shift on him. Yeah, it's kind of like check swing, knocked one right down the line. Like I think everybody should be doing when they put a shift on against you. Knocked it right down the line. I think he either got a single or a double out of it, but it was just a great piece of hitting and just shows you how smart and how talented of a hitter this guy is. So David Peralta, easily my top play here. He also has a 4 for 8 lifetime BVP against Shields with a double and 2 home runs. So not only does he profile well against them, but we've actually seen it happen in the past. So I do think it's a good spot here. You also have Paul Goldschmidt. 399 WOBA, 252 ISO score, 4 for 8 lifetime against them with the home run as well. So I think Goldie's still in play. Then you want to look at some of those lefty bats. So a guy like Jake Lamb is a lefty with power, should be somebody who plays well against Shields, who gives up a lot of home runs and a lot of hits to lefties. Socrates Brito, the young kid, Left-handed bat has been hitting in the 2-hole in that order for them. So I think he's somebody else you can look at as well. So quite a few bats on this Arizona team I like. Just remember, the game is in San Diego, though, so it's not a great hitter's ballpark, not a ballpark that usually yields a lot of runs. But then again, James Shields is somebody who has been giving up a lot of runs, so maybe none of that really matters. Next game I want to talk about here is Toronto at Boston. This is a game I think we're going to see a lot of runs in. And the good thing about some of these, interdivision matchups is you have a solid base to look at. You have a solid amount of BVP because a lot of these guys have faced each other, quite a few times. So Rick Porcello is somebody who has struggled throughout his career against the Toronto Blue Jays bats. He's also somebody that's given up about a 285, 290 batting average to both right and left whip, again, evenly to both right and left-handed batters. Now, left-handed bats hit a few more home runs off of him, but, right-handers have their home runs as well. And, this team is one of those teams that kind of highlights that for you. You have Jose Bautista with a 395 WOBA, 268 ISO, 13 of 28 lifetime with 3 home runs against Porcello. So let me say that again. Jose Bautista, 13, 28 lifetime, so like a 450-something average with 3 home runs already against Porcello. So I think he's in an excellent spot tonight. Definitely one of the few outfielders I do want to pay up for here. I also think you can look at a guy like Josh Donaldson, 359 WOBA, 306 ISO, righty-on-righty matchups, 7 of 23 lifetime, so hitting over 300 with 1 home run. So he's seen Porcello and, knocked him around a little bit as well. Edwin Encarnacion, another guy that you can look at here, 390 average, 390 WOBA, 283 ISO score, 10 of 29 lifetime against Porcello with the home run as well. So all of these guys have good BVP. They faced him quite a few times, and they've been able to knock him around. So I'm expecting a lot of runs out of this Toronto team today. Now, on the other side, you can look at R.A. Dickey. Now, here's a little, teaching point for you guys. R.A. Dickey is about the only pitcher in the league that still throws a knuckleball. I think there's 1 or 2 other guys who rely on it as well. But when you have a knuckleball pitcher, BVP becomes very bad splits, looking at how he does against righties and lefties and ISO and WOBA and all these numbers and call signs that we talk about. None of that really matters against Dickey. The only thing you do when you're looking at Dickey and you're trying to figure out who you want to target, you look at the BVP and you try to find guys who have hit the knuckleball well in the past. So here are just a couple names that stand out. Hanley Ramirez, 10 of 33 lifetime against Dickey, so 300 batting average. That's someone we can look at. Xander Bogaerts, the shortstop, 11 of 30 lifetime against Dickey. So those are pretty good numbers as well. Mookie Betts, 8 of 26 lifetime. Again, all these guys around 300 or above. I think all these guys are in play, and they all make some sense for me as guys that I want to roll out there. 2 guys who didn't really have great numbers when I looked were David Ortiz and Dustin Pedroia. So just keep that in mind when you're building your lineups if you decide you want to stack up a whole bunch of Boston bats here. Next game we're going to talk about, we got Baltimore at Texas. You got Martin Perez, the left-hander. Very tough on lefties, doesn't give up a lot of home runs. But right-handed bats did hit 304 against them with the 152 152 whip last year. So let's look at some of the bats that you can take against him. Adam Jones is back in that lineup for Baltimore. He's usually their best bat against left-handed pitching. 382 WOBA, 222 ISO last year. Definitely somebody who's pretty solid. He is only like 1 for 9 lifetime against Martin Perez, but I do think that he turns that around because he profiles as somebody who should hit the ball pretty well against Perez. Another guy we can look at is Mark Trumbo, who's been on fire right now. 362 WOBA, 239 ISO score. Definitely think he's somebody I want to have in some of my lineups. And then you can look at some of the cheaper guys on Baltimore that I think make some sense too. J.J. Hardy's 3 for 6 lifetime against Perez. Matt Wieters, 3 for 6 lifetime against Perez as well. So if you're looking for a couple of the cheap options, this Baltimore offense has been on fire, and having exposure to it is definitely not a bad idea. On the other side of this game, Baltimore's throwing a guy named Vance Worley. He used to pitch for the Pittsburgh Pirates back in the day. Left-handed bats hit 307 against him with a 1.80 whip. And he does have a low home run rate, though. So he's not a guy that gives up a lot of jacks. The ball gets kept on the ground a lot, but they do wind up with a lot of hits. Prince Fielder is probably the guy who stands out the most. 368 WOBA, 139 ISO. That hasn't flashed the power that he has in the past lately. That is the big deal with Prince Fielder lately. But he is 4 of 9 lifetime against Worley with a home run. Mitch Moreland getting more playing time now that Shin-Soo Choo is out. 345 WOBA, 190 ISO score. Think he's somebody else you can look at here. And then the guy who I actually like the most is the rookie, Nomar Mazara. They called this guy up. He's hitting in the 2-hole. He's got some power. He has some consistency. He has some speed. He's a guy that can fill up a stat sheet for you and pretty much put in stats in every category across the board. Next game we're going to talk about is the Chicago White Sox against the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. Not really looking at a lot of bats here. You got Chris Sale for the Chicago. He's out to left-handed bats. Righties hit him okay, but still not really well. I think it was about a 228 batting average last year, 1.05 whip. Gave up like a home run every 7 innings, so nothing spectacular. There's really nobody on Tampa Bay that I want to target. If you're looking for a target, if you put a gun to my head and said I had to take somebody, it would probably be Logan Forsythe. He does hit very well against left-handed pitching. He did have a home run off Sale last year, but I think he had a home run in like a 1-for-5 or 1-for-6 performance. So if he gets a hold of one, yeah, he could take him yard, but more likely than not, he's really not going to have that good of a game. Next guy I want to talk about, right-hander Rizzi. He's got a guy that's got a little bit of a reverse splits going on. He's going up against that Chicago White Sox team, and whenever you go righty-righty against the White Sox, the guy that stands out the most to me is always Jose Abreu. 387 WOBA, 244 ISO score for Abreu. He's got a lot of power, hits very well in righty-on-righty situations. He's probably the only guy I'd be willing to roll out there against Odorizzi, but he's again only out there in a GPP. I'm not looking to target any of the bats in this game. I think you got 2 good pitchers going up in Tampa Bay, which is a good pitcher's park, and I don't think either one of these offenses are really going to put up a big number today. Next game we can talk about, we got the New York Mets against the Cleveland Indians. Bartolo Colon is pitching for the Mets, and I mean, I don't really know what to say about Colon right now. I can go through the numbers and all that with you, but logic and reason, he's still a pretty solid pitcher. Cleveland is in the bottom third of the league for runs and for batting average, so it's a pretty good spot. It's a soft spot for him. I think Bartolo Colon does okay today. I'm not looking at a lot of Cleveland bats. The one Cleveland bat I do want some exposure to is Jason Kipnis, who's starting to heat up. Had a home run the other day, had a couple double-digit fantasy points in the last few games. 357 WOBA, 145 ISO against right-handed pitching. He's a left-handed bat, hits right-handed pitching well, hits fastballs well as well, and that is something that Bartolo Colon throws almost predominantly. So I do think Kipnis is in a good spot here. On the other side of this game, we got Cody Anderson, and Cody Anderson's a guy that sabermetricians love. If you look at his stats, 119, 238 batting average, 119 WOBA to lefties. That's really good. 225 batting average, 104 WOBA to righties, which is even better. So his numbers last year in 2015 were pretty solid. You look at this Mets team right now, lowest batting average in the majors, second lowest amount of runs scored, top 10 for most Ks per 9 inning. I mean, this looks like a great spot that you can roll out Anderson in. He's at home in Cleveland, pretty good pitcher's park. Not a lot of home runs get hit there. The left-handed bats are probably the way you'd want to attack. So guys like Duda, guys like Conforto, those are probably the guys that you'd want most. But like I said, when you look at the numbers, it doesn't really seem like a great spot where you want to roll out Mets bats. I'd almost rather roll out Cody Anderson than any of the Mets bats, and I don't really think I'm going to wind up doing either today. Next game we can talk about, Washington going up against Philly. Game is in Philadelphia. Joe Ross is pitching for Washington, and I really like this guy. He's a good young pitcher. He's lights out to right-handed bats. They're only hitting 172 with a .74 whip against him in the limited innings he's been up in the majors. Left-handed bats have had their way with him, though. 279 batting average, 1.59 whip. So I do think that lefty, there's really only 2 lefties on Philly that even garner any consideration. I'm not a big fan of Ryan Howard. His batting average has been declining. His power numbers have been declining. So not really a huge play that I'd like to take. Odubel Herrera hitting in the 2-hole is probably the best guy that you want out there. He's pretty solid. You know, he has a little bit of a beer league softball kind of swing. He takes big cuts at the ball, so his power hasn't been shown really yet, but playing in Philadelphia with the swing that he has, I think he is eventually going to be a little bit of a home run hitter. But for now, he's hitting up towards the top of that order, and he's getting on base. So he's the one left-handed bat that does profile well against Ross, but I really like Ross today. I think he's somebody I'm going to roll out there in some of my tournaments as my top pitcher. The other side of this game is Jeremy Hellickson, who has been on fire so far in 2016. His first couple starts have been very, very good. He is a guy that's usually a reverse splits guy. So even though he's a right-hander, right-handed bats actually had a higher average against them. They hit about 275 over the last 3 seasons. So Hellickson's probably the guy that you want to target against, but I don't really love any of the right-handed bats. The only guy that I really like in this game, I like Daniel Murphy a little bit, and I like Bryce Harper a lot, which, is no surprise. He's one of the best players in baseball. Against right-handed pitching, 423 WOBA, 271 ISO score, and he's already 2 for 3 lifetime with 3 walks to Hellickson. So Hellickson either pitches to him and he gets a hit, or Hellickson pitches around him. But either way, he's been on base in 5 of the 6 plate appearances he's had against Hellickson, and I think that's a pretty solid number that we want to take advantage of. Next game we can talk about, we got Atlanta going up against Miami. Wei-Yin Chen is pitching for Miami, and I think he's in a pretty good spot here against Atlanta. Now, he's very tough on left-handed bats, so any of the lefties in the Atlanta lineup, I definitely think you got to throw out right away. Right-handed bats, though, did hit 274 against them, 132 whip, 25 home runs in 142 innings. The only right-handed bat that even really garners our attention on this Atlanta Braves team is Adonis Garcia, who's hitting in the middle of the order. This guy's pretty good. He's solid. He's been getting more playing time right now with everything that went on with Hector Olivares. He's probably going to wind up starting at third base at this point, or keeping a spot in the outfield where he's been starting as well. He is literally the only bat I'm willing to go up against. They got a 196 team batting average, 10th most strikeouts in the league, and they've only scored 24 runs through their first 9 games this season. So not really a team I think we want to target many bats on. Other side of this game, I'm on the fence about how much I really like these Miami bats. Miami is not a very good hitter's ballpark, but Williams Perez is also not a very good pitcher. Left-handed bats hit 300 against them with the 162 whip last year, gave up 9 home runs in 59 innings, and right-handed bats hit 278 with a whip of 1.48 against them. So, I mean, he's the kind of guy that you want to stack up against. He's bad against lefties. He's bad against righties. You can basically take any 4 or 5 guys in the order, put them together, whether they hit right or left-handed, and they're in a good spot against them. So, Stanton is obviously the number 1 option, 382 WOBA, 267 ISO, has the power to hit the ball out of any park, whether it's a good home run park or not. So he makes a lot of sense. I like Justin Bour a little bit too. Left-handed bat with some power, 352 WOBA, 216 ISO score. He makes sense. You got guys like D. Gordon, Martin Prado, Christian Yelich. They're all solid options, but none of them really have big upside. Other than D. Gordon maybe stealing bases, none of those guys are big power hitters. They don't normally drive in a ton of runs. Yelich does hit in the 3-hole, but again, he's basically a singles hitter. Maybe gets you an RBI here and there, maybe scores you a run here and there. But for the most part, he just kind of bangs out singles and gets walks, which is great. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But for fantasy, there's just not much upside. So in a cash game, I think a lot of these guys are viable. In tournaments, I'm really only looking at maybe D. Gordon and, maybe a little bit of Stanton in my lineups. Next game is Milwaukee at Pittsburgh. You got Jimmy Nelson going up for Milwaukee. Nelson is lights out to right-handed bats, and that's probably why he was so good in his last start against Houston. Houston has a lot of right-handed bats, and they strike out a lot. So you got a high strikeout number from Nelson, and the right-handed bats didn't really do all that much against them. So that's why he wound up with a big number. I'm not saying that this is a softer spot because I don't think Pittsburgh is the greatest offense, and Pittsburgh as a ballpark is not the greatest place to target bats against. But I do think that, he basically had the perfect matchup for him against that Houston team that, rolls out 4 of their 5 biggest bats at the top of the order are all right-handed. If you're looking for guys, I think you're looking for lefties here. They hit 302 against them with the 168 whip. So I think guys like John Jaso, 353 WOBA, 177 ISO, not a ton of power, but he does get on base, should be up top of that order. You got guys like Gregory Polanco, who's solid, 5 of 15 lifetime against Nelson. And you also have a guy like Matt Joyce, who, again, we talked about him last week. He hit lead off the one game. He hit third the other game. They don't have a lot of left-handed bats to throw up against right-handed pitchers. So Joyce has been finding himself not only playing, but also up high in the order. So if he's going to be hitting up high in the order, definitely think he's somebody who we have to look at. Now we got Jeff Locke on the bottom side. Locke is a lefty. Right-handed bats are the way you want to go against them. He is a ground ball pitcher, though, so I'm not really looking for a ton of home runs here. And he is very tough on left-handed bats. So I guess you want to look at some of the righties. Guys like Domingo Santana leading off, 383 WOBA, 235 ISO against left-handed pitching since last season. A guy like Ryan Braun, 379, 231, 10 of 31 lifetime against Locke with the home run. So not only does he profile well, but he also has the BVP to back it up. And then a guy like Chris Carter, 347 WOBA, 242 ISO, big ISO number. He's a hit or miss home run play. So obviously that makes him a GPP play in daily fantasy for us, but I do think he's an intriguing option. And then the last guy I want to mention, catcher's a pretty weak position today. I like Jonathan Lucroy. He's 10 of 24 lifetime against Locke with the home run. And those are some pretty solid numbers, especially considering that, like we said, you're not going to be getting a ton of guys at catcher that are really in good spots today. So I think it makes a little bit of sense to take advantage of Lucroy and roll him out there. Next game we can talk about, Seattle against the New York Yankees. We got Nate Karns pitching for Seattle. Left-handed bats do better against him. 248 batting average, 1.46 whip last season. Right-handed bats were only 229, but they did have 14 home runs in 73 innings. So basically 1 every 5 innings for the right-handed bats. The guy who stands out the most to me on the Yankees is Mark Teixeira. 360 WOBA, 270 ISO number, left-handed bat at Yankee Stadium against a right-handed pitcher. All those things say to me that he could be somebody that takes Karns' yard today, and that's why I think I like him the most. I like guys like Gardner and Ellsbury, but if they're not stealing bases and they're just hitting singles and occasionally scoring runs, which is basically what they've given us so far this year, they're not really worth paying up for. If those, you can find other guys who can probably give you that same stat line in the 34 to 3,900 range at outfield on DraftKings. There's no reason to pay over 4K for one of these guys, and who's basically very likely to give you the same thing. So unless one of them or both of them start picking up the power numbers, or unless they start stealing bases again, I really can't justify paying up for them when there are 5 or 6 other leadoff men that you can pay down for that can do basically the same thing. I mean, look at a guy like Rajay Davis yesterday. He had the stolen bases, he had the home run. That's the kind of stuff that you need. If you can't get that out of a guy who's above $4,000, you're going to be able to find guys like Rajay Davis, or even somebody who we're not thinking about now, who winds up getting a start and leading off today. Those guys are out there for cheaper prices. So there's no reason to pay up for guys that don't have more upside than that. Luis Severino is pitching for the Yankees. I really like this guy. He's a good young pitcher. He's a solid kid. He's tough on right-handed batters. They only hit 213 against him with a whip of 1.04. Lefties were 244, 135. So left-handed bats are obviously the way we want to attack them. The guy who stands out the most here for me is Robinson Cano, who's off to a pretty decent start. 369 WOBA, 181 ISO score against right-handed pitching. And we've seen this guy do pretty well in Yankee Stadium at the beginning of his career. He likes hitting here. He's going to enjoy coming back to the Bronx. And, I would be expecting a pretty big game out of Cano. I don't think it's a narrative street play. I think it's based on the numbers. But I also do think that the fact that he's coming back to New York, he is going to be motivated. Adam Lind, another guy you can look at, 380 WOBA, 193 ISO, like him against Severino as well. And then maybe you can throw a little bit of Kyle Seager in there. I'm not a huge fan. I'm not really jumping to put Seager into my lineups, but I don't think he's a horrible play either. So he's somebody else that you can kind of look at in that situation. Next game we talk about, we got 4 games left here. We got Cincinnati against St. Louis. Carlos Martinez is pitching for St. Louis, and he was pretty solid last year. Left-handed bats were the way to attack him. 262 batting average, 142 whip. Did give up 9 home runs in 85 innings, so not really a ton of home runs that he gave up. The guy who stands out to most to me is Joey Votto. He's probably the one bat that I would like. 395 WOBA, 186 ISO. My only problem is lifetime, he's 0 for 7 against Carlos Martinez. So even though we haven't actually seen it in practice, and that's always a red flag for me, something that gives me a little pause. Now, 7 is not the largest sample size we've ever sampled, so I'm still willing to give him a look and roll him out there, but GPP only, and he's definitely nowhere near the top of my favorite first base list today. On the other side of this game, we have Tim Melville. Now, Melville's a AAA pitcher who got called up because Anthony DeSclafani is on the injured reserve list and is not going to be making this start today either. He had a pretty good first start, but he didn't go very deep into the game, and I think that's going to be the case here. He's a guy who had a higher whip against left-handed batters last year in the minors, but he also had a higher average against right-handers. So I do think guys from either side of the plate make a little bit of sense to use here. Now, I think this is also going to become a bullpen game. And what I mean by that is Melville's not a guy who's going to go longer than probably 5 innings maximum. So you're going to get at least 3 or 4 innings out of relief pitchers in this one. And I just think that some of the Cardinals are going to be able to tee off, whether it's on Melville or on whoever they bring in as the long reliever. This is one of those kind of games where if they chase Melville early in like the 3rd inning, you could see them just put the worst pitcher they have in their bullpen out there, hand them the ball and just be like, just throw strikes and try to get us through this one. So I think you can look at guys like Matt Carpenter, 369 WOBA against right-handed pitching in the last 3 years. A guy like Jeremy Hazelbaker, who's been very, very good to start the season. He's on fire right now, hitting in the 2-hole for them. So he's another guy that I want some exposure to. And then Randall Gearchuk is the last guy I want to talk about. 365 WOBA, 244 ISO, even in righty-on-righty matchups. He homered yesterday. He has something crazy like 5 runs and 7 RBIs in his last few games, or 7 runs and 5 RBIs. He has been producing. He's been putting up some big numbers. He struggled the first 2 or 3 games of the season, and people were like, I told you this guy was going to be a bust. But it looks like he's turning it around and starting to hit now. So I think we can look at him as well. Let me just get a drink here. Next game we can talk about is KC going up against Oakland. This should be a pitcher's duel, so not really looking to target a ton of bats in this game. Volquez has been pretty good. His strikeout numbers are up. His velocity's up. People are really starting to talk about this guy like, hey, remember when we thought he was going to be a great pitcher a couple years ago and he just kind of turned out mediocre? Well, so far he's looking really, really good again. Right-handed bats had been a way to attack him. 263 batting average, 133 WOBA, so a little bit of a reverse splits kind of guy. Oakland is in the bottom 6 of batting average and a bottom 6 for runs scored. Plus, they're playing in Oakland, which is not a very good hitter's ballpark. Probably one of the bottom 6, I think, as far as hitter's ballpark goes. One of the top 6 as far as pitcher's parks goes. So, really, there's not many guys on Oakland I'd look at. The only guy who kind of profiles to do decently against them is Josh Reddick. 362 WOBA, 214 ISO score. For some reason, I don't think that there was either not a big BVP history or maybe it wasn't a good BVP history. But he's the only bat on Oakland that I'm really looking at all, and again, only for tournaments. On the other side of the hill, we got Rich Hill, who is somebody who's played parts of the last 4 seasons, but hasn't really put together a full, 100-something inning season since, 2010 or something crazy like that. So, yeah, he has looked good in his first couple starts. But you've always wanted to attack him as a left-handed pitcher. You've always wanted to attack him with right hand. One guy that they do have on that Kansas City team who hits well as a right-handed bat against left-handed pitching is Lorenzo Cain. I definitely like Cain today. 393 WOBA, 208 ISO score. This guy always seems to be under-owned in tournaments and occasionally puts up some of those big games that could really help you out. So Lorenzo Cain, pretty much the only Kansas City Royal that I'm looking to target. Again, Oakland's not a great hitter's park. Not really a game I want a lot of exposure to there. Next game we can talk about is Detroit at Houston. We got Dallas Keuchel, the reigning Cy Young Award winner. Right-handed bats do a little bit better than lefties. So even though this is a pretty righty-heavy lineup in Detroit, I don't think this is a really good spot for him. J.D. Martinez is 0 for 6 lifetime against Keuchel. Miguel Cabrera is 1 for 9 lifetime, and Justin Upton is 0 for 6. So you got a 1 for 21 lifetime WOBA from the middle, the heart of that Detroit order. So as great as all these right-handed bats have been, Keuchel has owned them in his career. So not really looking to use any of them. The one guy who does have decent numbers against Keuchel is Ian Kinsler. 7 of 22 with the home run. 346 WOBA, 158 ISO score. Kinsler definitely one of those guys that I think is in play. You got Mike Pelfrey going. Pelfrey's allowed left-handed bats to hit 312 with the 179 WOBA last year. Allowed right-handed bats to hit 297 with the 122 WOBA. The thing that saves him is he doesn't give up a lot of home runs because he tries to pitch to contact but keep the ball on the ground. So I guess a guy like Rasmus makes the most sense as a left-handed bat to attack him with. He's off to a hot start. He's batting cleanup right now. Got a couple home runs already. A lot of RBIs driven in. So I like Rasmus a little bit. I think you have to like Carlos Correa because he's just the best young shortstop and one of the best young hitters, period, in all of baseball. So he's somebody that I would roll out there. I got to be honest with you guys. I hate Pelfrey, and I would really like to take a whole bunch of bats going up against him. But this Houston offense doesn't really jump off the page at me. The game is in Houston, so it's a good hitter's ballpark. Altuve's been hot. I guess you can roll with him. Springer really hasn't been hot, but he's a good player. He's got a lot of upside. Like I said, Tyler White maybe is another guy that makes sense as a right-handed bat. But, I'm not really looking to go too deep into this game. Rasmus I like a little bit. Correa, somebody else that I think I like. If you want to look at some of those guys that, are left-handed bats like the Preston Tuckers, the Jason Castros, the Luis Valbuenas, Pelfrey is 312 batting average, 179 whip to left-handers. So they would be guys that I think you can consider for your lineup. Next game we can talk about is the Angels against Minnesota. Now, Garrett Richards is pitching for the Angels, and I think he's in a great spot. This Minnesota lineup is terrible. They have the most strikeouts per 9 innings, the least amount of runs scored, and the third worst batting average right now. So you add all those things together. They only have 14 runs through their first 9 games. You add all that stuff together, you're talking about 1.5 runs on average with, I think close to 10 strikeouts per game and the third lowest batting average. So, I think this is a great spot for Richards. I think people are off him because there are a couple other pitchers priced a little bit cheaper who make a little bit of sense. And there's also a bunch of guys priced above him and one guy who's priced in his price range. In most places, he's pretty close to Zach Greinke. And I think both guys are in pretty good spots today. The other side of that game, we got Tommy Milone going up for the Twins, left-handed pitcher. Right-handed bats hit 273 with a 132 whip, 14 home runs and 96 innings pitched. So you want to look at the right-handed bats. This Angels lineup isn't really good either, though. Trout is obviously in play, 409 WOBA, 257 ISO, 5 home runs and 21 at bat. He has a home run and is 5 for 21 lifetime against Tommy Milone. So I think it's a pretty good spot here to roll Trout out. You could probably also take a look at a guy like Pujols, who's 9 of 22 lifetime against him with 7 doubles. So he hasn't taken him deep, but he has hit him pretty hard. 7 extra base hits is nothing to sneeze at, especially in only 22 at-bats. And that wraps it up. That's all the games that we have on the slate today for you guys. Like I said, it was a big 14-game slate, so I tried to get through it as fast as I could. It took me a little bit longer to do the research, and I had a couple meetings I had to attend this morning. So I apologize that the video's out a little later than usual. You guys know I usually try to have it up by 10 o'clock, but right now it's only 1:15 on the East Coast, so you still got 5.5, 6 hours to watch this before lineups lock, and hopefully it helps you get some money today. So thank you very much for listening to us here at rotocurve.com, and as always, stay classy, DFS.